If you can get a court to say you're Satoshi, then you can, and you are of this mindset, you can then go ahead and you can sue Bitcoin developers, Bitcoin exchanges, whatever, to say, look, I've got a court ruling that I'm Satoshi. Your version of Bitcoin is not the real Bitcoin. I'm Satoshi. My version of Bitcoin, which is in Craig's world is BSV, is the real Bitcoin. So you need to either pay damages or license from me, etc., etc. So the whole point was to get a court to rule he was Satoshi, which would give him the foundation to file these lawsuits that he did at the same time anyway. But that was the whole point, was to get that first one through the door, get a court to say he's Satoshi, give him massive backing when he tries to take on the institutions to try and get the billions from them. Because again, just like with the ATO, it's a shortcut to riches.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Bitcoin Audible. I am Guy Swan, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. And we have got a really fun one today. So I have done the audiobook for FakeToshi, which is actually the beginning of a 3-part series. You've probably heard if I've talked about it a couple times on the show here. If not, I have stepped back from audiobooks. And I had a pretty good conversation leading into this with Arthur and Mark here, is that I didn't want to. I love doing the audiobooks. It's fun. Despite the grueling work of having to go so slowly through a book, you have to really read it when you read the audiobook. I do just enjoy it, but it's far and away the most stressful and the least scaling of all the work that I do. So if I want a pair drive to get the attention that it deserved, that it absolutely had to have, or it wasn't going to work, I had to step back from something, and it had to be the audiobooks. But I am honored, and I'm very happy to say I did the audiobook for the first one, and Mark, the author, is doing the audiobook for the second and the third. I love that Mark is actually the one doing the audiobook. This is the story, the intricacies, the frauds, the unbelievable brash arrogance of Craig Wright and his claim that he is Satoshi, and the many different pieces of how it went down, what we could cover, what we can't cover, and what takes too long to even try to unpack. Arthur Van Pelt and Mark Hunter, Dr. Bitcoin, have put together an incredible detailing and breakdown of the entire saga of the FakeToshi era. If you haven't really dug into this, it is mind-blowing. You're going to be reading this book or listening to this book, and you're just going to have to stop and like, wait, what? Because there were at least half a dozen times where I was just baffled, and I had to make sure I was reading this properly, and that when I said it out loud, that it was in fact saying what it was saying. So it's just so crazy. These two guys are probably the resource. If I had to say who knows the most about this and who has spent the most time digging into every little detail and personality and backstab and who's on whose team and who is Satoshi and what piece did they play and how many coins does he supposedly have, is these guys right here. So this is going to be a fun one. I hope you enjoy it. Real quick, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors as well, to Ledin.io for Bitcoin-backed loans. They do simple, basic, like boring service. How do you safely and openly provide proof of reserves, Bitcoin-backed loans? I've been impressed, and I'm a customer. They have a special link for you for listeners to this show that has a little bit of discount right down in the show notes. A shout out to Synonym as well. They have created pubkey.app. That's pubky.app. What they've built is a set of protocols. Is how would you rebuild the pieces of the web that we have today centered around control of the network and the identity at the user? How could you do this decentralized, but provide everything just as we expect it to work. And that's what they've done. It's fascinating. If you're building, I highly suggest checking that out. I'll have my pub key up there too, so you can follow me on pubkey.app. Then we have Get Chroma. Chroma, I didn't bring them with me. I usually have them right here and it's getting dark. But Chroma, they have the nightshade glasses. These are blue and green light blocking glasses that are really good for protecting your hormones, just dealing with your light health. Because I think, especially for energy levels and for getting to sleep, if you have trouble getting to sleep, you've got to try this before you go spend an enormous amount of money somewhere else. Get your light health right. Block your blue and green light at 7 o'clock or sundown every night, and see if that doesn't work after a few weeks. Check them out. 10% discount with code Bitcoin Audible. And then lastly, the HRF. They have an amazing newsletter, the Financial Freedom Report. I don't know of any other resource that actually keeps up with the fight for financial freedom, the tools, the encroachment, and the government overreach happening all over the world. The Financial Freedom Report is it, and they do a phenomenal job. The HRF just does incredible work, and I always mad respect for them, and I'm honored that they support my work as well. Thank you to all of them for products, services, and support, and check them all out. I've got links down in the show notes. So with that, let's get into today's episode. This is Mark Hunter, Dr. Bitcoin, and Arthur Van Pelt. Chat 152, I believe, Forging Satoshi. Well, guys, welcome to Bitcoin Audible. Welcome to Bitcoin Audible. We got Arthur Van Pelt and Mark Hunter, Dr. Bitcoin. Good to have you guys on the show officially. Welcome, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yep, same. Thank you.
Absolutely. I guess, of course, Arthur and I hung out on Shitcoin Insider. So we've been there and done that once.
Yep.
So I wanted to, obviously you guys have put together and are continuing to put together the saga of FakeToshi. And it's funny, I've honestly, more than anything, I've read a bunch of the stuff, Arthur, that you put out. Jameson Lopp has a really good breakdown of like the history of all of that stuff as well. It really, not even legal stuff, but just like the times that he's put his foot in his mouth or said something that has just revealed just a lot about who Craig is and who he definitely isn't. So it's always been like a fun journey. And, you think something about a topic, but then you read a book like FakeToshi and you're like, Jesus Christ, it goes so deep. And there's so much just lies and bullshit. the bullshit mountain is so big, and you think you're like, oh yeah, no, there's definitely a mountain of bullshit there, but then you like get a little bit closer and you get like the real scope and you're like, oh god, that bullshit mountain is massive.
Yeah.
So
when reading part one, you've only seen the run up to the whole Satoshi show.
It's just the introduction basically, and it is fascinating. There's so many little things that are just like, holy god, I did not realize how crazy this piece of it got, and that the show almost ended. That's like kind of the crazy thing about this whole story is that we almost went full circle and it almost fell apart on for Craig before Calvin showed up, and then it like started. It was like chapter 2, like a whole new era. But before we like really dive into that though, I'm just curious, Mark and then Arthur, we'll start with Mark. Can you give me like your background? What got you interested in this? How did you get in touch with Arthur? Did y'all know each other ahead of time? Like kind of give me the rundown and the whole the spiel on Dr. Bitcoin.
Sure. So I was working, this would have been 2018 or 2019. I forget what year it was, but I was working for a crypto news outlet. And I think it must have been with the Craig Wright trial, which would have been filed like a few months before this point. And I was reading a bit about it, and I'd known about Craig Wright. I've been in Bitcoin since 2017. I've known a bit about Craig Wright, not a huge amount. I'd seen him in the news and this sort of thing. didn't know a great deal about it because it didn't know much about Bitcoin at the time. So then I'm working for this news outlet, and this massive, $10 billion lawsuit, Bitcoin related lawsuit comes up. I'm like, what? Oh, is this guy again? And so I'm digging around, and I come across this Medium account, this guy called Arthur Van Pelt. I'm like, this guy's obsessed. He's written loads about it. Look at the detail he's gone into on this. And like most people that have read Arthur's work, I was just like gripped. Like you said, the depth that this goes to is actually staggering. And this was even before a lot of the Kleiman evidence came out, even before then with signing session stuff. I think Arthur maybe had 2 or 3 articles out by this point. And so we just started doing a podcast as part of the website. And I said, well, let's get this guy on. He knows about this Craig Wright thing, and we can get to the bottom of this. And so Arthur came on. I kind of took over the conversation, and I was like talking to him, trying to get these details about what the case was about, who this Craig Wright guy was. And then, of course, over the half an hour that we spent, or whatever it would have been, I was like, this is just, even more fantastic. And I had him back on again, maybe a couple of years later. And again, I forget why Arthur came back on, but it would have been some development that happened. Maybe the Hodlonaut case, I'm not sure.
Probably even not even a year later, I think. I think
we
did two in a year or something.
Yeah, which would have been 2020, I think. And then in mid-2021, I'd done a bit of deep diving on Craig Wright since then. I've been speaking to Arthur on and off. And I said to him, like, this story is so good, but it's so comprehensive and it's so rabbit holey that it needs to be told in a more streamlined and commercially viable way. And I personally I love podcasts, and I'd always wanted to do a podcast. I love true crime podcasts. And I was like, this is kind of the ultimate true crime podcast in some ways.
Yeah.
I was like, if we can find a way to tell the story across 6 episodes and make it viable to the general public, we need to tell this story, basically. And so we did. So we got together late 2021. We summed up everything in book 1 and most of book 2. We summed up across 6 episodes somehow. And then that was right at the start. That finished right at the beginning of the Kleiman v. Day 1 of the Kleiman v. Wright trial. I think it finished, or it came out. I forget which. And then we went from there because there's so much stuff coming out on a monthly basis. I said, we could do this like 1 a month, and there's always something you need to talk about. And so we did. So every month we just recorded what had been happening in the last month in terms of the lawsuits, what he'd said, what he'd done. And it was a gift that kept on giving. We just kept on running with it. And then when the Copa thing really got going, we did a massive series on that. I don't think anyone covered the Copa trial more than we did because we knew how big it was going to be. And then we'll cover it a little bit later. But then we decided that the next best thing to do is to turn it into a series of books where we can dive into things we couldn't talk about on the podcast. But I'll let Arthur give his story. But that was, to this point, that's how we met and how we became Dr. Bitcoin.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So Arthur, give me your rundown. How did you get roped into and stuck on this thing? Aren't you getting paid by like the government or something to just bring Satoshi down?
Oh yeah. Oh, they found at some point they found an old Bitcoin address of me where I used to pay for Bitcoin miners. I think around 2014, 15, because then I was rather big in Bitcoin mining, and I bought for rather big amounts, dozens of Bitcoin miners for a lot of money. And somehow I think I reused that address later as a donation address, and they found really old transactions on it. And they thought, oh, he has been paid, because if we look at the numbers of Bitcoins, which was multiple Bitcoins, going back to 2014, 15 or somewhere there, it was not that much. But at the time when they found it in 18, 19, 20, no, maybe 20 around there, of course, Bitcoin has risen in price, and then it looked like a lot of money, but back then it was not so much.
Yeah.
Anyway. No, I got interested in the subject. I knew it's the same story that I'm telling every time, because that is how it went. In 2015, I got to know Bitcoin in 2012. I bought my first in 2013. And in 2015, just before the Wired Gizmodo story, I knew about Craig Wright, but only because I came across his name on Twitter for a bit, and I couldn't place it somewhere. It's just that I remember that I saw his name. But with Wired Gizmodo, I was rather quickly, because of the turmoil that broke loose, I was quickly on the side of mostly the technical people of Bitcoin who debunked his forgeries and the fake PGP keys and stuff like that. I immediately saw, this is fakery, and then he's not Satoshi. In 2016, that was only a few months later, we saw the signing sessions. It was a big failure. Now, that was for me a completely okay. I was not interested in him much anymore, so I forgot about him basically for several years, until 2019, when he started to sue Adam Back and especially Hodlnaut, who was was somebody that I respected a lot online for his work for Lightning Network. So I felt, sort of enraged. I mean, not literally, but sort of professionally.
A little bit pissed off.
Call it like that. And so I was like, I will map out, for the benefit of the Bitcoin community, I will map out all the fraud, all the things that we know about him. Because, of course, in the sidelines, I followed him for a bit. And a lot of people have been talking about him, writing about him, small articles, big articles, little debunks, big debunks, articles on mainstream or crypto websites. And I was like, but nobody has ever put it together. And it is needed now to have a source of all that stuff. So I started with a Weebly page. I started to do my own research together with a guy from Australia who helped me in the beginning. He helped me, for example, with the debunk of the what was it, the fiber to Banyu story. That great stuff. And that's how it went. The Weebly page was ramped up with a page on Medium where I started writing articles, and it turned out that I like to write long articles, not just short and brief articles, but long forms like Andrew O'Hagan is doing. So he's doing deep dives into a subject, and I'm doing the same. And I take a subject, and it easily gets to 30. Even I think my longest articles are 90 to 100 minutes. Reading time. It's quite a bit. If you take it all together, I think it's enough for 6 books. But I have been writing now. Today, I had a lot of sort of celebration. My 50th article came out today.
Nice.
But it was a short one because it was a translation of a German article, which was only 8 minutes. But it was hot news, actually. And we might want to pick that up a bit later in this episode with you also. But it's how we can connect Craig Wright to the Wirecard scandal that is now connected to Calvin Ayre, actually. But first, back to 2019, Adam Back and especially Hodlnaut, they inspired me to start writing and to start debunking. In 2018, I stopped working full-time as an IT consultant, and I became a Bitcoin consultant. That gave me a lot of time on my hand because I'm working from home. So I have a lot of time since then to put into it. I do it as a service for the Bitcoin community. I do not earn any money with it except for a few donations every now and then. And actually, I got a few gifts that run into the hundreds of dollars, not just $5 or $10, but a few people have been very spontaneously giving me several hundreds of dollars. So it might run into, I don't know, between $500 and $1,000 over the 5-6 years that I'm doing this, which is not much.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Man, you think about how cool that is, though, like just that, like there was nobody in the middle of any of that. Like you just got sent because people like, shit, there's a lot of work. this was useful. This was entertaining, you know?
I love it. I love to do this. Keep pushing, and of course I spent that money also actually mainly in Australia, because in Australia when you want to have court papers, then you have to pay for them, and then you have to hire a document broker, and they're not cheap. So the moment you want more than a few pages, you're gonna pay good money for to have some information. So if you want, for example, in what later became the Kleiman case, where he was sentenced to paying $100, that was around a court case in 2013, late 2013, where he dragged Dave Kleiman into a Bitcoin story that never happened around the company W&K. Now, if you want to know all that, if you want to have the original paperwork that went into court, like I said, then you need a document broker for that.
You know, one of the interesting things, like kind of going back to when you first heard about it, because I was seeing all of that stuff live too, with the Gizmodo article and the doxing and the revelations and then the key signing and everything. And what I found really interesting was how quickly, like literally, like how quickly it went from, oh my God, is Satoshi? Like is somebody literally actually Satoshi? To, no, yeah, he couldn't sign anything. Like he couldn't prove anything at all. Like, this guy's obviously full of crap. Like, I mean, like within the same day, you know, most people were just poking holes in the claim and the story, and then the whole signing event was such a disaster because, and that was like really the big thing, is that he claimed he could, and then so blatantly proved that he couldn't, you know, like this, that he didn't even either he was clearly just trying to convince people who didn't know how the basic signature and the cryptography mechanism of this worked, or he was too stupid to know that what he was doing didn't prove anything, and it was just something that you could just grab from the blockchain, you know? So it's like one or the other. It's like either he's too stupid, or he's just hoping that everybody else is too stupid.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. He has the stamina to. He wants to be in the limelight all the time. He wants to have all the attention of the less literate people who don't know much about Bitcoin. But the moment you start knowing a little bit about Bitcoin, the moment you read Satoshi, that's what I've been doing a lot. Actually, that was for me. It was not only the technical debunks. It's mostly the guy doesn't even talk like Satoshi. When I read 700, 800, 900 posts that Satoshi has been doing on all the forums and mainly the Bitcoin forum, and all the technical stuff that he has been writing, Craig Wright cannot even talk like the guy. I mean,
yeah. Not only can he not talk, but Craig Wright has a bunch of writing. Like, he has a bunch of stuff that he wrote. He has the blog and website, and you know, like all that stuff. They don't like they're in totally different universes in like how they talk, the mannerisms. Like he can't go 2 sentences without just cursing or saying something just like unbelievably belligerent, you know? Yeah. And Satoshi's like such a clearly soft-spoken and doesn't really make declarations, you know, like only rarely does he like even seem to be really assertive. It's mostly just kind of like, it always kind of felt like a Nick Szabo or Adam Back sort of character. They're not super confrontational. They do have opinions and thoughts about things, but it's mostly from a curiosity, you know, perspective. Like they're pretty explorative in how they talk. But yeah, just like if that doesn't, the level of difference is pretty staggering.
Yeah, for most people it works like that. I will never forget that a few years ago, for example, well, we all know her, Lynn Alden. She said along the same lines. the guy doesn't even talk like Satoshi. How can he be Satoshi? It's impossible. And when I dived into the early history of Craig Wright, when he started to know Bitcoin, that was in 2011. That was the first time when he mentioned it online. And there are no traces anywhere that he knew Bitcoin before July 2011. And the way he talked about it, the way how he mentioned it in a long line of payment systems, and just on the side, like, oh man, that is how everybody, when you start knowing about Bitcoin, you start mentioning it as an option, and then you do a more deep dive, and then a few years later he popped up around Bitcoin, and then he wrote some longer articles about it on his personal blog, and there you can immediately read, oh, I placed my bet on Bitcoin, and he said something like that. I was like, yeah, that's what you're doing now, because you're starting a tax fraud and you're using Bitcoin in it. It was in April, just after around the time that Dave Kleiman died. Now you can immediately read in those 3-4 articles that he just bought his first Bitcoin on Mount Gox, and he got so enthusiastic that he went down the rabbit hole with Bitcoin, and that's how he wrote about Bitcoin also. Now, of course, those 2 moments in 2011, in July, August, on what was it, the website where he pushed 2 articles, the conversation, yeah. Mm-hmm. And his personal blog with 4 longer articles, you never see him revert back to those moments, because he is ashamed, because he knows that everybody who is reading that stuff will immediately recognize, that are the moments that you started to learn about Bitcoin, that you started to talk about Bitcoin like a noob that we all have been in the beginning. So how can you be the inventor of Bitcoin when you talk like that in 2011 and even later in 2013? I mean, yeah.
Well, of course, then he goes and says that it wasn't him writing it. He had other people controlling his content.
Every time he gets caught, it's somebody else. Yeah. Every time. That was one of the, like, to the point that it got really funny. Like, especially when I was like reading through the book, because it was like, oh, he just got caught, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, it's gonna be somebody else wrote that. It's like, and the things that he had literally previously said, oh, I totally wrote this. This is totally me, and there's no question about it. Like, this is everything about this is me. And it's like, well, I had an intern who did this, and they died, or I forgot their name, and they don't exist. They flew to Egypt, and I never spoke to them ever again, and you'll never be able to contact them. Good luck. Like, like, it's just incredible that there are literally still people out there who buy the bullshit.
This is the thing, the whole cognitive dissonance thing. I don't understand, and I will never understand why people are so desperate to believe him when it is so, he puts his foot in it so many times, like again and again and again. He'll say something or do something that completely undermines something that he's previously said or done, and they for some reason refuse to let it register. And I mean, this is something that when this whole saga, however this whole thing finishes, it's going to be the one enduring thing for me, is how do people still believe him after all the lies, and why are they so determined to believe him? I'll never understand that.
They work really, really hard, like really, really hard to try to make it fit together. Like if you just put all of the excuses and the caveats and the changes of story and everything together, it's so incomprehensible. Like, it's beyond incomprehensible. In fact, like, that's kind of what he bets on, is that it is so unbelievably incomprehensible that nobody can have a good argument against it, because literally, none of this can go together. Like, all of this is contradictory. So if he's just never involved, or it's always somebody else attacking him, or of course I did it on my computers. Like, well, somebody obviously had access to all of my computers, and I'm still using this 5 years later and acting like without any changes or anything. And I'm not making any note or anything. Like, sure, somebody compromised my entire system. I did nothing about it for 5 years, like it's crazy. before we really get, because this is a never ending rabbit hole. But Mark, you said so the audiobook is done. The book is out. Like it's all out and available now. This is all volume 1 of a 3-volume series. And I yours truly got to do the audiobook for the first one, which I seriously am so honored. Thank you. I really hate, as I said before we started this, I really hate that I can't do volume 2 and 3. But Mark will be doing the audiobook. Are you going to do the third one too?
Yeah, I'm doing the next two. I'm doing the next two. Yeah, I'm committed to it now.
You got it, Mark. You got it. But honestly, a book read by the author is always like, that's always my trade-off. If I can't do it, I want it read by the author.
People say that, so yeah, that makes me feel a bit better.
yeah. But you are we have codes, right? We have a giveaway. Go ahead and mention that, because I know we'll come back around to that at the end.
Yeah, so we've got because obviously the Audible connection, we've got some free audiobooks to give away, some free copies of volume 1 of the audiobook. So yeah, we'll circle around to it later. But if you want to, if you're an Audible member, or if you're not a member and you want to get hold of volume 1 of FakeToshi read by Guy, then keep on listening, and we'll at the end of the show we'll let you know how you can enter the competition to win yourself a copy.
Sweet. Okay. All right. So keep that in mind, everybody. Now I want to talk about what the real story is. I want to let's put aside him impersonating Satoshi for a second. And let's talk about the tax thing. Let's talk about like what actually started this, because this happened years before Satoshi ever came into play, right? Give me the background. What was Craig actually doing, and what fight was he fighting that made his claim of Satoshi useful?
I'll give a brief overview, and then Arthur can pick up and go into some detail and points, because it is such. I mean, as you'll know, Guy, it's 100,000 words of story, so we can't possibly do it justice in a few minutes. But we'll give it a damn good go. So, I mean, the long and short of it is that he was trying to con the Australian Taxation Office out of millions of dollars, basically, because the short answer is that he was faking transactions, he was faking contracts, he was faking deals, he was faking clients, he was faking so much, to faking supercomputers, all this sort of stuff. He said all these businesses, legitimate businesses he founded, he connected them all together and said they were all doing this research and development work around Bitcoin. And so he was buying this software, buying this hardware, buying this, buying that, buying this IP, and he was conducting all these trades in these Bitcoins that he had mined back in the day. So what he was doing was saying, well, normally this transaction, say that one of my companies licensed some software from another company for $5 million, let's say. That $5 million transaction carries with it a goods and services tax charge that the Australian tax government authority levies on the company doing the selling. So what Craig was doing was saying, well, you've got some things running, some incentive schemes running where we get the rebate paid back to us. There's GST and R&D as well. There's two different things going. So he was basically creating these these paper transactions and saying, this $5 million deal incurred, let's say, $10,000 in GST, but I'm going to claim to have that paid back to me because of the incentive you're running. But that would be paid back in cash. So he would be using fake Bitcoin transactions that created a tax that he would then try and get paid back in cash. That's the nutch. That's the acorn of the whole thing. So there's so much more around that, but that was his basic scheme, was to try and do that. And it ballooned to the point where he was trying to claim around $20 million in total between all his different companies. He tried to claim $20 million in tax rebates and things back to him. Yeah, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, he said, that he did. There was one deal, which I love, which we talk about in the book. There's one deal he did with a guy who was basically a porn baron. He was a noted fraudster, convicted fraudster, and Craig said that this guy acted as a broker and brokered deals for some banking software and some software from Siemens for some computers. And he paid $60 million in Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, he was trying to say. Yep. As if Siemens and Al Baraka, this Islamic bank, are going to accept $60 million in Bitcoin. It went from being paid in Bitcoin. He first said to them, "Oh yeah, I paid them in Bitcoin." And they said, "Well, where are the transactions?" And he said, "Here's the transactions on the blockchain here." And they said, No, these wallets don't belong to you. These wallets belong to somebody else. And the company never got them. Oh no, he says, I didn't sell them. I didn't send them Bitcoins. I sent them private keys to Bitcoin wallets that I own. So I sent them the private keys so they could unlock the wallets and take the coins out. It's just utterly laughable. But that was the core of the deal. And the ATO basically pulled the whole thing apart and said, no, 94% of your company's income has come through this tax scam, basically. So that's what he was trying to do. Arthur, is there anything else any nuggets you want to add that I've missed out there?
Yeah, no, this is basically it. But the question was, and then I'll answer that part. Between 2013 and 2014, when in 2013 he started all that, the tax fraud and implement Bitcoin in it. At that moment in time, he did not, not in public at least, or semi-public, he did not pretend to be Satoshi. He pretended to be an early miner. And having put IP from Australia in America in 2011, and he wanted that IP back in 2013, so he sued WNK in 2013. But at that moment, WNK was dissolved; it was not an active company anymore. It belonged to Dave Kleiman, but Dave Kleiman was dead in April 2013. So after his death, that lawsuit started. It was actually just a one-sided double claim of indeed around 60 million in total, two claims of 28 million in total, almost 60 million. And that way he sort of obtained a paper value of 60 million in Bitcoin IP, and because he had forged paperwork and contracts and stuff and communication that mentioned Bitcoin mining. So he was, pretending to be an early miner, and he had to ramp that up almost, organically somehow, in his way, organically, to an Satoshi position, because when you are an early miner and you claim to have those millions, hundreds of thousands in Bitcoin, and those Bitcoins are mined in 2009. The only person who has been mining that much is Satoshi. So it somewhat organically he started to become Satoshi, and he first dipped his toe in January 2014 in a few emails with a few people. The ATO got involved. Nobody criticized him. Nobody debunked him. So he was like, "Oh well, I'm feeling secure about this, so I can continue. I can continue with this nonsense." And nobody debunked him in that time, because he kept it rather low profile, only between the business people that he was dealing with at that time. And in 2014, it started to ramp up. And I think the earliest public outings, which were on his blog, I think is only late 2014, early 2015. That's when he was searching for a more public profile of Satoshi and find acceptance of it, because he could use that for the bailout that he needed when he had to start paying tax back to the ATO.
Yeah, it was when he went public, I feel like I remember, I can't remember exactly the detail, but basically something had changed on the back end, and him going public was going to help he was trying to put pressure on making him basically getting some sort of reinforcement on him being of looking legitimate. Is that actually around the time, or am I mixing that up? Was that around the time he was trying to get the Australian government to treat it as a currency so it wouldn't have capital gains?
He did try to do that. I think he tried 3 times to do that, and each time he failed. But I don't believe there was any Satoshi element to that. That was just him trying to reduce his tax bill.
Yeah. You know what's really funny? One of the craziest things about this story to me is how many dead people are deeply tied to everything that has happened. Like and they're not mentioned, but then they die and suddenly they're involved. That happened there's 3 people, two or 3 people who we're not going to talk about them at all for 6 years. They're not mentioned. There's no even a hint of but obviously there was this other person. That person's dead. Boom. This person was also the person who wrote all this stuff on the website, and this person was totally the other Satoshi. And it's just the second nobody can respond and nobody can actually prove anything, suddenly they're deeply, deeply involved.
A great example of that came, I think it was actually the Clyman v. Wright trial with the Bitcoin.org receipt, because there's obviously, that's one of these holy grails, isn't it? Is the Bitcoin.org receipt. And Craig promised it for years and years and years. He promised we're going to see the Bitcoin.org receipt. And when it finally was entered into evidence, it was entered into evidence for the Copa trial where it was debunked. But he said he got hold of it from an anonymous Reddit user who sent it to one of his lawyers, who then passed it on to him. And they were saying, well, who is this random Reddit person? Oh, I've got no idea. The reason he could say that is because the lawyer had since passed away. And only after she passed away did he come out and say she got it from a random Reddit user. Why has a random Reddit user got your Bitcoin.org receipt? And why have you not followed it up?
Oh, my God.
Bananas. Yeah.
And then he submits it. And then they're like, oh, well, this is total BS. And he's like, I don't. How would I have known? I got it from a random Reddit user. It's you've been talking about this for years. God.
And then the guy from England, the spy who was found dead in a bag. Oh, it's also a beautiful anecdote. What's his name again?
Gareth Williams.
Yeah, Gareth Williams. Oh my God. There was this anecdote. I think it also popped up during Climate, that there was this sort of seance, sort of video call, but without being a video call, because, of course, he realized in the back of his head, oh my God, Gareth Williams was not alive anymore. That was something, it was an anecdote about that played in January 2011. That was when he tried to, that's what he said at least, which was of course a bullshit story. That's when he said, I tried to erase all my Satoshi stuff from the face of the earth, because I didn't want to have to do anything with it anymore. And Dave Kleiman helped me at that point in time, and Gareth Williams helped me at that point in time. Little did he know, well, maybe in the back of his head, because he was a bit insecure about the means of communications, Gareth Williams was dead since August 2010, so he could not have had a video call with the guy. Crazy.
You mentioned the hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin that quickly turned into, I guess the highest number was 1.1 million Bitcoin, I believe.
Yeah, there's different numbers. Craig's been giving different numbers all the time.
The amount of pulling numbers out of his ass is just incredible. But he, what I found really, really interesting, and which basically unfolded under this over this whole situation, a lot of it came out during Copa and these sorts of things, was that and it also just kind of shows how nonchalant I think he was at the beginning of this. He didn't really plan. I wonder if he really did not anticipate it to go this far and this big. Like, he just thought that it was going to work to get his tax thing for that year, And then that was as far as he needed to prove or give examples of anything, because he basically just grabbed a bunch of addresses from the Bitcoin rich list, right? Like, and he explicitly said and posted, these are my addresses and these are the coins that I own. And then over a period of a couple of years, it was like, well, this one's literally Mt. Gox and it has since moved. This one just got sent and signed on the chain by some dude who literally wrote in a message, Craig Wright is a fraud, or Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto or something. This one also, this is another one connected to Mt. Gox. Like, it's like the dominoes of the things that he listed were just increasingly, fell. Like, I think it was like, what was it? What was the number? Does anyone even remember off the top of the head? Like 11 addresses and 5 became provably nonsense. Do y'all remember?
It depends which case you want to take. There's he's probably given dozens and dozens over the years to the ATO, and they've all turned out to be fake. So you could almost pick a number under 100. He's probably given that many. There's been so many times when he's had like a little clutch here, and like you say, they all turn out to be owned by other people over the course of time.
And it also automatically debunked sometimes when he tried to make he came up with a story that he used it for a payment, and then he is mentioning something about a payment, and then either the address is already empty or it was paid months and months later, so it couldn't have happened as he said it happened. I think it was around Professor Rees, I think. He was also paid in Bitcoin, and the family never knew about Craig Wright, let alone about Bitcoin being paid to Professor Rees, who was, of course, also not alive anymore when things happened.
Actually, hold on a second. I want to dig a little bit into this Professor Rees thing, because this was actually a part of the story that I didn't know very deeply. Like, I just kind of heard about it. It was all Dave Kleiman and all of that stuff when I was really digging into it. And so a lot of the Professor Rees details were totally new to me. And that is such a fascinating, another one of those somebody was involved as soon as they were dead thing, Professor Rees being a prime example.
Actually, he was part of Team Satoshi for a while, huh?
Yeah. He was definitely, he was like half of the research for Satoshi, and he wrote a bunch of the code. I borrowed him to write a bunch of code. Who is Professor Rees?
I'll take this one because this is one of my favorite little stories, like you said. So this was a guy who, I mean, there must have been a connection between Craig Wright's family and his, because it seems that Craig Wright's grandfather, who pretty much raised him to a point, and he was one of his big influences. It seems like him and Professor Rees, they knew each other. They had some work during the war or something. There was some sort of connection there, and so Craig tried to use this connection to as part of his ATO scam. He said, Professor Rees did some work on Bitcoin, and he charged me $1.6 million for this work. And I want to get the tax rebate back, please. And they said, okay, well, you do realize he's 94 years old, or at the time you sent the invoice, the time you said he did the work for you, he was 94 years old and in a home with dementia. And he said, no, he did the work for me a bit before then. I was like, okay, well, why does the invoice and why does the contract say this date? We agreed back in the day that I would pay him a certain amount, and I'd pay him a certain number of Bitcoins, and then that number, the value went up, so of course the dollar value had to go up. He said, okay, well, where's the transaction then? Well, here's the transaction. Right, that transaction, as Arthur just said, that's an empty wallet, and even the money going there, that there's not the right number of coins in that wallet to go there. Oh, well, no, I didn't send him the coins. I sent him private keys. Okay, well, how did he get them Bitcoin out? Oh, his family must have been looking after it. Right, well, his daughter's been looking after his financial affairs ever since he was taken into the home. She's never heard of you, never heard of Bitcoin. He's not been near a laptop. She's not done an invoice for him. Like, where on earth does this all come from? And the moment that he passed away, Craig then submitted the invoice and tried to get the tax claim back, and that's when the story all came out. It's another one of those things where he's just found a useful person who he can say, I can use this to try and get some money back without thinking it's going to get any further. But the ATO spoke to Professor Reese's family, who basically said, as I said, we've never heard of him. He's never done any work for him. And he's got dementia and he's in a home at 94 years old. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And he didn't even write code.
No, he'd never written code in his life, and Craig said he'd written some code for him.
And paid him $1.1 million for it.
And the ATA came along and said, right, well, because they gave Craig a bit of advanced warning and said, we're going to come to your office in a couple of weeks, and we want to see the work that Professor Reese did for you. Okay? It's like, okay. So he comes along and says, right, where's the work Professor Reese did for you? Oh, it's not here. It's at home. I left it at home. Okay. So he can't see the work he's done for you. Can you please run the calculations that on your computer? You got the calculations he worked out for you. Can you run them for us and show us what it all came out? Oh, I've done them already. We don't need to do them again. They've been done once already. Every excuse under the sun he could find, he rolled out for them. And they were like, no, we don't believe Professor Reese did any work for you ever.
Dude.
He's mad. I love these mad little stories.
There's literally a dozen of them. And it's like one of those things. I want to ask you about this, actually, because this was one of the interesting things about the FakeToshi book, is that you can, but you can't really tell it in chronological order. You know, like this thing's so sprawling and there's so many different pieces to it that if you laid the breadcrumbs for something that ends up being debunked 5 years later, you'd have forgotten, because you've been laying so many little pieces to this puzzle that when you finally unraveled it, you'd be like, wait, because you're trying to follow like 10 different stories at the same time, because he has changed stories. You know, he has like totally different narratives and paths that have occurred during all of this. And as obviously the case, he doesn't even seem fully prepared to back up a lot of the things that he starts. So he literally has to come up with the narrative 2 years later when he's finally put on the stand to defend something that he's put down as like some foundational piece of this. And then he has to figure out how to back twist this whole thing to be relevant to his whole persona, his whole like kind of position on how this played out at the beginning, and a whole bunch of other things he says. And he'll contradict like 30%, but he'll try to like specifically hang on to. And this was one of the most interesting things, is when you guys detailed out like when he changed his narrative, because his narrative was basically different at every trial. And what the difference was at each trial was the liability. Literally, it was literally the piece of the narrative that changed was always the piece that this one court case hinged on, so that it had to play out in his favor. So it was like, one was Dave Kleiman was Satoshi, and another one is Dave Kleiman was totally not involved, and he just like has I just like gave him a bunch of Bitcoin or something, or he gave me Bitcoin or something, specifically because he would have to owe the other trial. He would have had to owe all of the money to Kleiman and Kleiman's family if the other narrative that he had done in the previous trial was something that he actually hung on to. So that was like one of the craziest things. How do you tell this story? How do you actually go about laying this thing out? Because if you had like a chronological map, the map is as nonsensical as his attempt to piece these things together.
It was so difficult. I mean, and actually the first one is a good example, because when you're trying to map out the tax fraud, just taking the tax fraud as the example, what I had to work with is these ATO reports into his companies, and interviews with the tax office. And so everything from sort of 2013 to 2015 is, like interim reports on his companies, final reports on his companies, post-final reports on his companies, interviews he's had along the way. And each of these reports is giving its own little chronology of what they've spoken to him about and what he has said and what's happened and what transactions have been made. And every company is connected to one of the other companies. So you can have 5 reports on 5 different companies, but they're all interconnected and they all tell their own individual story. And so it's like trying to do 5 jigsaw puzzles at once and come out with a complete soul picture. It is so difficult to do. And you just, and then like you say, so you've got that. And then he says something on Slack that undermines something from back over here. But then he says something at a trial 2 years later that backs up the thing from over here. So you've got to go, well, hang on a second. What's he saying now? But what's the impact of that? And it's 10 years of shifting sands. And it was so hard to understand. And it's not a complete narrative either. There's gaps. There's gaps of months. There's gaps of Bitcoin transactions. There's so many gaps. You've got to try and work out what's happened in the gaps and see if you can work out, where what's happened in that point. It was so difficult to do. But what really helps actually is knowing what Craig is like. Once you know the person you're dealing with, you can work out, right, if something is a little bit not quite right, knowing Craig as I do, what has he probably done here? It's like trying to be a detective and work out, if you're like a detective, you're trying to catch a serial killer, for example, you're like, right, we know his modus operandi now. So we know that if this happened, he's probably done this. And if we assume he did that, does that fit from what happens next? Yes, it absolutely does. So that probably happened. So I've said sometimes, we don't know that this happened at this point. We can infer from what was said before and what was said afterwards. So yeah, there's so many points where that is the case, but it continues in books 2 and 3 because he, as you say, he paints a narrative in one trial and then he'll go to another trial. And because some evidence has come out that totally disproves what he said before, he'll change his story again. There's one point actually in the second book where it's in the Kleiman v. Wright case, and it's over the ownership of W&K. And as Arthur was saying, the court case in Australia, when Craig was trying to get this $57 million from W&K, he had to say to them, Dave owned half of the company. I own half of the company. Dave's dead. It's all mine. I'm suing this company to get it all back. When it came to the Kleiman case, he had to try and say that never happened. And so Judge Bloom, who's the judge in that trial, she says to his attorney, do I believe what he told the court in Australia, or do I believe what he's telling me now? He can't have it both ways. Which one are you expecting me to believe here? And I'd forget what his answer was, but he had to come up with some blustering answer that didn't put Craig Wright in massive trouble. But that just summed it up. Even the judge is like, right, he said 2 contradictory things. Which one are you telling me is the truth? Because at the moment, they're both lies.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's how I went with it also. When I remember writing in the early days of my Medium articles, when I wrote a 3 series with the 3 long articles about FakeToshi, the early years, together with my friend Crypto Devil. At some point, you just note down all the anecdotes and you just don't bother too much. What is the coherent thing here? Because it's not. You see him, just one example, you see him in 2013, 2014, when he starts building up Bitcoin holdings over the course of like 6 months, 9 months, it changes from 10,000 Bitcoins up to over $700 million in Bitcoins that he owns. And he is checking the Bitcoin rich list every month, probably, come up with new addresses that he adds to the list and or in his mind. And it changes all the time, and you can find all those that are in the small details of my articles. You will find it that it runs up in for example in FakeToshi number 1 it goes up to 300 million, and in FakeToshi 2 he reaches the stage that is the highest number that he ever mentioned of his holdings in Bitcoin. And then remember back then that his wealth in Bitcoin and Bitcoin related IP was, if I remember well, $730 million or something. I mean, and that's why it was so so nice to put everything under the umbrella of Potemkin village, because that is what he has been building, a series of Potemkin villages that he connected with each other, and it's all empty. It's all fairy tales. It's meaningless. It's not supported by anything substantial. It's all his fantasy.
You know, I'm really curious, because Calvin Ayre. Well, we haven't even covered Calvin Ayre yet, and Calvin Ayre is literally a whole. It's his own beast when all of this kind of starts unfolding. But I want to talk about where and how his lawsuit against Bitcoiners, against Bitcoin devs, and then also against Hodlonaut fit into this, because he went on the offensive at a couple of different points during this, and he was mostly, like, it seems like throughout a lot of this situation, he was playing defense. Like, he's trying desperately to protect himself from the ATO. Now he's trying to protect himself from this Kleiman situation, from the Copa situation. But what do you think his purpose was? And this was, I think, after Calvin Ayre came onto the scene with attacking the Bitcoiner. What do you think he was trying to get out of that was going to help him?
Oh, that's very easy. I mean, they were looking for Calvin Ayre somewhere said it literally. They were looking for a fool to drag into court and get an either by a ruling or by threat that the opponent would say, yeah, I believe that you are Satoshi, and I will not repeat this type of libel and defamation anymore. But unfortunately for the Bitcoin community, and unfortunately for Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre, somehow both Hodlonaut and Peter McCormack hold on to their story, and Peter McCormack got away with it in a good sense, and Hodlonaut was just I'm not giving in. It was stressful for him, very stressful, but he just didn't give in, and Craig Wright never got what he wanted.
Because the reason he did it as well is, if you can get a court to say you're Satoshi, then you can, and you are of this mindset, you can then go ahead and you can sue Bitcoin developers, Bitcoin exchanges, whatever, to say, look, I've got a court ruling that I'm Satoshi. Your version of Bitcoin is not the real Bitcoin. I'm Satoshi. My version of Bitcoin, which is in Craig's world is BSV, is the real Bitcoin. So you need to either pay damages or license from me, etc., etc. So the whole point was to get a court to rule he was Satoshi, which would give him the foundation to file these lawsuits that he did at the same time anyway. But that was the whole point, was to get that first one through the door, get a court to say he's Satoshi. We give him massive backing when he tries to take on the institutions to try and get the billions from them. Because again, just like with the ATO, it's a shortcut to riches. That's what he wanted, is a shortcut to riches. And this was what he thought was going to be the way to do it.
Yep.
Having to sell Bitcoin hurts, especially when you are certain it is going to be worth more in the future. But you can actually get access to the fiat without selling it by using a Bitcoin-backed loan. Maybe this is for an emergency. Maybe this is for an investment that you think will do really well, but it won't beat Bitcoin because it's monetizing. Or this is actually something that you know you'll get back, but the timing just isn't right, and you don't want to let Bitcoin go for that span. This is why Ledin was built. They let you borrow against your Bitcoin quickly and easily. And Bitcoin is the ultimate collateral. There is no more perfect thing to use securely in this setup, and something that you can verify with their proof of reserves that they do. There are no monthly payments if you don't want. You pay it off at your pace. There's no penalties for early payment. There's no finder's fee. It is quick and simple to get your funds. I think their turnaround right now is like 12 hours. And I don't know why every Bitcoin company doesn't do this. Everybody who's at least holding Bitcoin for other people. But they do a proof of reserves so that you can confirm that your balance is there. And something that made me really happy recently is they just cut their Ethereum loans, they cut their yield product, they cut their non-custodied loans at lower rates, and so they now offer one simple, hyper-focused thing. Custodied, secure, easy, Bitcoin-backed loans. Use someone with a good track record who's done over $10 billion in loans, available in over 100 countries. They do proof of reserves, and they've made it through the toughest times in the market without having a single problem. There's no credit check. There's no hassle. It's simple. This is why Ledin.io exists. Get the value of your Bitcoin without having to sell it. Remember to read up on how the collateral works. They're really good at reaching out and making sure that everything stays balanced. Remember that Bitcoin is volatile, so do not overextend. But if you know how to use it, this could be a huge benefit to your Bitcoin stack and give you optionality in accessing fiat without it being that selling Bitcoin is your only option. I've been a very happy customer. Check them out. The link and details are in the description. That's so crazy that he was literally trying to claim ownership of Bitcoin. Like not of like Bitcoin addresses, but like of the Bitcoin system that was released. And it's funny about that too, because it was free and open source. Like Bitcoin was always released like that. How could he? I mean, not to say that anything legal has to make sense, because it usually doesn't, but there's at least some attempt at coherence. Why would he have been able to backtrack? Because that could have been devastating, obviously. If you have to force everybody who's using Bitcoin in any commercial sense to pay a license now, or sue developers for literally altering software that didn't belong to them, or making edits to his system. What was that gambit actually? Like, do you see that as actually? I mean, because that could have been devastating. Was that realistic? Do you think that could have gone that way had it been not for McCormick and Hodlonaut and basically everyone he went after, essentially holding the line and taking the hit and paying the enormous sums to defend themselves and winning?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, I saw it as a threat, but because I already knew that the threat was not so high, because Craig Wright isn't Satoshi, so I've always been trusting for justice to run its course. So I've never given it a long and big thought in that sense. I always trusted, like I said, justice to take its course in the right direction, and that actually happened. But I still find a very funny way of thinking is, think about when Calvin Ayre was bailing out Craig Wright in 2015. What we calculated back then, it costed him $15 million. What if he bought Bitcoin and sit on that stash for 10 years? How rich would he have been, instead of spending what we think he spent is roughly around, just a round number is 500 million, including all the infrastructure that he has been paying for, the salaries of several hundreds of people for several years, all the legal stuff of Craig Wright going on. All the losses that he had by BSV tanking from almost $500 down to now $20. I mean, the guy has been spending, what we think, hundreds and hundreds of millions into this stuff that he will never recover anymore. On the other hand, it's gambling money that is coming in, probably in big streams also. So he might not be too worried in that sense. But yeah, he would have had billions if he bought Bitcoin for 50 million.
I did the math really quick just to see. So this was 2015, right?
I think it was around May or June in 2015. If you take that price,
the price would have been April, May. So yeah, about $200 to $220 to $240 maybe. And he could have gotten himself about 68,000 Bitcoin and it'd be worth about $6 billion today. Just for that, not accounting for any of the other stuff that he's paid for and the ongoing costs and the lawsuits. Calvin Ayre could have just bought $15 million worth of Bitcoin, and he'd have $6 billion, $6 billion fiats today.
Just to your point about the MIT license and being open source, Craig had a very novel argument. He said that everyone else misunderstood the MIT license, but only he understood it properly. And that it precluded people from changing certain aspects. Because obviously, he's got a big thing about SegWit and the rest of it. So he said that the MIT license does not provide for the changes that were made to the protocol. No one else understands it except for him.
Only he gets it.
That was his argument. Yeah.
So give me the rundown of. Since we brought up Calvin Ayre, I want to know about this news because I just saw this like literally like moments ago, about an hour or so before we started this. I just saw like browsing through stuff about the wire fraud in one of my newsletters, and so I haven't read it. So Arthur, you said you just translated and published something about this.
Yeah, I came across it. It was a sort of surprise for me also because I never, to be fair, I didn't pay too much. It was a big thing a few years ago, I think around 2020 or 2021. That Wirecard collapsed with billions in money being lost or something. And it turns out now that a few journalists in Germany working for the Bayerischen Rundfunk, which is the Bayern radio, basically. But they also have a website, BR or BR24, where they publish stuff. But it's in German, so for me it's not so easy to read. Although I do some German, and I had a few years German in high school, but that is a long time ago. But I was notified that the article existed, and I knew because most of if you do this for several years, then of course several journalists. So I have been talking to these journalists and many others from Wired and the New York Times, and I mean I know all those people. Not that I talk with them every day, but so I was aware about of Wirecard and the scandal that has been happening there. But these journalists, Mr. Fünfinger or something, and then another guy, they say that they can prove that it's actually Calvin Ayre behind it. Now, so I started reading and quickly translating that article because I thought, this is interesting, because if it is Calvin Ayre, then there's probably a link with Craig Wright, and I quickly came. I noticed several links in that article. For example, one of them is an important one, is Tisch Consulting. Tisch Consulting was one of the companies, it is mentioned in the article as one of the money laundering vehicles of Calvin Ayre. But Tisch Consulting is also the company that helped in the second half of 2015 to bail out Craig Wright for many millions. And the funny thing is, in the article, it is mentioned that in 2014, just before the bailout, many millions of money laundering money went to Tisch Consulting. So for me, the link is quite clear at some point. Because what I understood from the article, from the German article, is that they had access to the bookkeeping for 1 year. That must have been in, I think, 2014. And if Tisch Consulting is one of the vehicles mentioned in 2014, then it is also one of the vehicles in 2015, because it still existed back then. I think it was run or associated with Robert McGregor, and Robert McGregor was indeed a key person in 2015 who disappeared from the stage, I think around 2017. But in 2015, he played a rather important role. He was one of the people what I call the fraud squad of Stephen Matthews, Calvin Ayre, Craig Wright, and Robert McGregor. The four of them were doing and wheeling and dealing of the identity fraud that was set up then. So yeah, I translated the article and I added a few paragraphs with supported by a few photos, one email where the minister or an ex-minister of foreign affairs or something, who is now running a law firm on Antigua, Cortes, yeah, I already lost the name. But yeah, he was mentioned also in those early days around Craig Wright. So he was also wheeling and dealing with the identity fraud being set up in 2015. And he was also mentioned in the article of those German reporters. Yeah, so I found several links and I was like, oh my God, here we go. Craig Wright, the bailout has been paid with money laundering from the scheme around the Wirecard debacle. And wow, it's big news because it's one of the, I think for the last several decades, I think it's one of the most massive scandals ever in Europe. Now, and now we can connect Calvin Ayre and Craig Wright to it. It's amazing.
That's crazy that like it keeps getting deeper, you know, like that's a huge, like one of the most fascinating things about this whole story to me is just the sheer scale. Like you kind of have to be in awe of Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre and everybody in this.
You have no idea how many times I'm screaming from the rooftops that this is worthy of a documentary or a good movie. It only needs an editor and a good script writer to turn this into one of those amazing series like James Bond or Mission Impossible or that type of thing. I mean, it screams, go do this, Netflix or whatever. It's such a crazy story.
But this is part of the problem. Is it's so broad. I mean, how on earth would you do an elevator pitch for this story? This is one of the issues that I've got, is that, you know, I mean, well, this is why we turned into 3 books. This is why the podcast ran for 3 years. This is why it's 3 books, because I tried to fit into 1 book and I couldn't do it because we had to leave too much stuff out. I tried to fit into 2 books, but there was still too much stuff. And this is while COVID was still going on and that was all playing out. And then you can only tell the story across 3 books of over 100,000 words each. That's the only way you can do it justice. That's the smallest it can possibly be, because as you say, it's so vast, it's so broad. There's so many elements to it. It's like one of those, like the Count of Monte Cristo, like the family trees and stuff. You know, it's if you plot it like a Shakespeare thing with the characters, you plot everything out on a wall, and it's just like the links, the connections, where things go. It is crazy, and that is one of the problems, is that if someone was to try and really narrow this down and try and sell it to the public, just think of what you'd have to leave out. I actually almost don't want to see it in a way, because whatever the end product would be, it would not do it justice, because there would be stuff left out that I'd really want to see. But then because people could go to the books, so yeah, go for it, Netflix.
Yeah. Go read the book.
yeah.
But as I understand it, he broke a record. He is.
Yeah.
Tell me this, Mark.
We believe so. I mean, the idea is that it's almost certain he holds the record for the most number of forgeries submitted to a UK trial, a UK court case. There is nothing in any written records that exceeds the number of forgeries attributed to him through this case. Now, there might have been times where there's been really highly complex financial crime, and so if you count every transaction as a fraud, if you like, then you know that's one thing. But when you're talking about actual documents, forgeries, emails forged, you've got the whole LaTeX thing, the software forgeries. He there is no written records anywhere going back however many thousands of years British justice goes back and the records are kept of anyone coming close to him in terms of one person being responsible for so many forgeries. So he is almost certainly a record holder in that respect. So when you talk about it being impressive, the one thing I will say is his work rate, the amount of work he's put into this is actually incredible. I mean, Hitler had a high work rate. You know, these guys, they have it. They work very hard. Unfortunately, it's the direction they choose to put their energies in. If he put that much effort into doing good in the world, think what the amount of good he could have done. Imagine the late nights you've got to pull to put out those kind of forgeries at the last minute during a trial. And there wasn't all of them. There was a box of evidence that was supposed to be that he tried to introduce 2 weeks into the trial, and that wasn't submitted because it was too late. So we've got stuff we haven't even seen yet. You know, he was still creating this stuff late into the night. It's mad to think how hard he worked on that for absolutely nothing.
That's like such a beautiful example of like doing it he's trying to get rich quick, right? Like this was all about like, how do I create a fraud that saves me a lot of work so that I can get a lot of money very easily? And yet he put in more work than so many other people in just trying to prop up his lies and just trying to it was not a get rich quick scheme. It was a maybe end up in prison, maybe make a little bit of money after years and years and years of grueling work. It's like, man, if you had just bought Bitcoin and like just did something positive in the world, you could have come out so on top. Like this would have been great, you know?
No, yeah, but what probably helped is that Calvin Ayre has been sponsoring him. I mean, he had a rich life anyway, so he did not really need to put a scheme on his followers or on the BSV fans or anything like it. So he could pretend to not be looking for riches because he already got them. I mean, Calvin Ayre sponsored his lifestyle. I mean, he was able to rent a Bentley and a Lamborghini and whatever. He could fly around the world and do some speeches here and there.
He basically did live richly. He just had to defend it. He had to prevent it from getting snatched out from underneath him.
I was going to say there is a sliding doors moment because the whole point was when they signed this deal in 2015, initially, the whole thing was supposed to stay under the radar. Craig and Stephen Matthews both agreed that that Craig would not have to come out for about 10 years. The idea was they would set up this development, this end-chain development hub. He would churn out these patents. Like Stefan knew he was Satoshi. Calvin knew he was Satoshi. Maybe even the staff would have been told. They had to all keep it secret. The idea was for 10 years, Craig would pump out these patents, get paid this amazing salary, and then when the time came, he could say, well, look at all the work that I've done. I must be Satoshi. Look at all this work that I've done. There was never supposed to be the cryptographic proof because he knew they couldn't do it. So it was never supposed to happen. It was when Robert McGregor got involved to start with, but also there's a moment where he's talking to Andrew O'Hagan, who is the journalist and the writer following them around at this time. And only Andrew O'Hagan said, no, you're going to need public cryptographic proof. The public, I've spoken to Bitcoiners, they are not going to accept you waiting for years and years and years and then saying, look at my patents. They want cryptographic proof that you're Satoshi. And that was when Robert McGregor and those guys started having this idea that crap, what we're doing is not going to be enough. We're not going to be able to sell these patents for all this money unless we've got the cryptographic proof. The patents on their own aren't going to do it. And that was the moment in mid to late autumn 2015, when it started to shift more towards this public signing. If it hadn't been for that, we might only now be learning that Craig is Satoshi, because 10 years later, he's got all these patents and he's coming out and saying, I'm Satoshi, look at all my work I've done. So you never know what might happen, but there is that sliding doors moment of he could have got away with it if it hadn't been for that meddling Robert McGregor and Andrew O'Hagan to badly paraphrase Scooby-Doo.
No, I think it's only an impression that we get, but I think Robert McGregor was one of the more critical people in this story. On the other hand, I also think that especially Stephen Matthews must have been in the complot. Is it an English word? He knew. What we know now is that it's quite certain that Stephen Matthews knew from the start that Craig is not Satoshi, and they set it up to get as much money from Calvin Ayre in the first place. But Calvin Ayre must have known things also rather quickly, and he had the idea to get all his money back quickly, together with the rest of the fraud squad. Indeed, by selling the patents for several billions, together with an outing of Craig Wright as Satoshi. Never happened.
Has anybody from the inside circle, so to speak, turned state's evidence? Have they like backed out or turned against the group? Like, has there been infighting?
Well,
basically,
I mean, yes, Christian Agger Hansen is the one that is the most explosive one. He was the N-Chain CEO for about a year, and he came out in September 2021. Was it September 24 last year? Wasn't it September last year? Beg your pardon. And he came out and said Craig's a fraud. This whole N-Chain thing is a scam. I'm sure we even heard some Wirecard Calvin Ayre stuff back then. He completely flipped and was posting emails and all this sort of stuff. We've got some great material from him about the inside workings of N-Chain and the whole Craig Wright thing.
Wasn't that in September 23 when it happened? Just before the trial, I think.
Yeah, it was. You're right. I'm too far ahead. So yeah, 23. So that was the most explosive one. But also you've got Steve Shadders, who was an N-Chain developer and a Craig Wright acolyte for a long time. He even tried to help with some of the stuff during the Kleiman v. Wright trial. At some point, I'm not entirely sure when he flipped, he realized that it was all a fraud, and he has been publicly against Craig Wright as well for a good few years now. So there have been a few that have left the cult, shall we say? Yeah.
Yeah, and a few other people that we are not, let's say, not allowed to mention because they want to stay anonymous. So we do have a few inside sources where we hear some anecdotes, but the most prolific figures is indeed Arthur Hansen and Steve Shadders. Yeah,
I ask specifically because if somebody was going to do like a series on this, like let's say a show or something, get 8 episodes out of it or something, like those would be the people to talk to try to get like the backstory of when they were aligned, when they were fighting, like what their goals were, what they were thinking, that sort of thing. Because do we have any concrete or idea of the relationship with Calvin and Craig now? Like,
I mean, that's one of the great imponderables. I mean, you just don't know. When Christian Agger Hansen turned rogue in 23, he sent he posted a fantastic email from Calvin to Craig and to a few others, where he basically called out Craig and essentially said, I don't believe you anymore. The Tulip Trust, which is this trust that's supposed to hold all these coins, these Bitcoins, I don't believe you. I don't believe that. We don't believe that exists. You need to sign now or it's over. I'm not funding your lawsuits anymore. You've ruined my life. You're ruining my kids' lives. We're done. And so you'd think that at that moment, that's when Calvin realized that he'd had the wool pulled over his eyes for a good 8 years or so. But then publicly, he defended Craig. That's the only naysaying we've ever heard has come from that. Publicly, he still backs him. So there's a couple of sides to it. But then about a day after the ruling for the Copa v. Wright trial, Calvin Ayre said on Twitter, I'm going on a journey I have been planning for a year now. Goodbye. He just skipped off like a day after the ruling. And what's interesting is that his Twitter feed, he mentioned Craig and Craig's cases, on an almost daily basis, multiple times a day in some cases. for years and years and years, always pushing Craig, always pushing BSV relentlessly to anyone who did or didn't want to listen. After that, he has not mentioned Craig's name once in his Twitter feed since the Copa v. Wright ruling. Not one mention of Craig's name since that ruling. So you kind of have to think he must be done now. Even if he doesn't believe him, he knows the game is up, surely now. But whether he's going to actually, whether they still speak, whether he's going to try and get some sort of recompense, I mean, I've no idea.
No, but what we think, and I think, if I remember well, it's also supported by Ayre Hansen. I think he mentioned it a few months ago on Twitter, half a year ago probably already. Is that this? And I think it makes a lot of sense that Calvin Ayre is still paying the costs of Craig Wright. He's now in Thailand, in or around Phuket, is what we know. He's growing cucumbers. Yeah, crazy. But it's still being paid, and he lives a nice life because we've seen photos of his crib, which is still a nice place to live, and he doesn't have that from his own money. Although he might have some money when he sold his shares in Enchain to Calvin Ayre, maybe he has a few million. Then he can buy such a thing. But on the other hand, it also makes sense that because Craig Wright knows a lot of dirt he has a lot of dirt on Calvin Ayre. So I think it's in somewhat mutual understanding, not really a friendship anymore, but it wouldn't surprise me to still see money going from Calvin Ayre to Craig Wright.
This is what I've maintained for a while, especially between Calvin Ayre, Stephen Matthews, and Craig Wright. This mutually assured destruction. They will never sue each other for that simple reason.
Because if somebody, as soon as they're enemies, they're both dead. They're both like completely done. Especially with this Wirecard thing coming out. And that's how I think it would be great to tell the story. It's a fraud. It's a fraud love story between two buds, and it's a story of betrayal. Ultimately, it's a story of betrayal, and they go their separate ways. Like I won't backstab you, and but no, that's God.
It is a shame, It is a shame we don't know more about that 2015 period. You can get your hands on a lot of people in the later years that have worked with them and that would happily tell some stories. But unfortunately, there's so few people that were around them at that time. There's the 3 or 4 main players between 2014, 2016, whatever it might be. And they're not going to turn on each other. And you just wish there was a few more people from that era that you could get some stories from, because that's the period where you really want to know what went down. But I just don't think we're ever going to get that.
No.
Well, that's the job of the director, right? You gotta just put a little creative dust in there and guess what they were up to. And some of the stuff with Calvin Ayre is, which is kind of why I'm eager to get into book 2, because literally book 1 pretty much didn't even there's so much to cover, even leading up to that. Just kind of like laying the groundwork for when Calvin showed up, because Calvin is his own character. Like we're quite lucky because the story almost naturally fits into 3. I mean, there is some crossover, but pretty much you've got like the three cycles of Craig Wright. You've got the 2011 to 2014, which is the tax fraud era. You've got the way we've done it, 2015 to 2021, which is the you could call it almost the FakeToshi era, where he's the signing sessions and the Wired and Gizmodo, and then the Kleiman v. Wright lawsuit. That's how we've packaged it. And then cycle 3 is the lawsuit Craig, where he's got all this like almost 12 concurrent lawsuits going. So it's almost divided up into three parts of his life, the three different kinds of Craig. So that's how we've done it. So you're right. We've covered a lot of years, 100,000 words, and Calvin's name doesn't get mentioned because it's everything that carries to that point. But book 2
starts from that point where Calvin and Stephen Matthews are kind of straight into it. So that's where we carry on from there. So yeah, if you're, and I've now got to go and edit book 2 with this new Wirecard stuff, by the way, I hate to add. I thought I was finished with it, but I'm not.
Oh God. One of the, oh God, the Wirecard stuff threw me. What was I about to say? Because it was with Calvin. Oh, yeah. So it was the element about the email. So basically we have evidence, which I don't think, if I did actually was exposed to this, I didn't remember, but Calvin Ayre was like, Craig scammed Calvin Ayre. Like, it wasn't like a partnership. Like, he was convinced that he was Satoshi, not that his plan was going to work and they were going to make a lot of money, but that he was actually Satoshi, and that it has only recently come out that Calvin Ayre's done believing him. Like, that Calvin Ayre realizes that he just got screwed. That's interesting, because my assumption, or my thinking, especially with the kind of character Calvin Ayre is that Craig pitched a scam. Craig pitched, like, this is how this is gonna work out for us, as opposed to trying to sell the Satoshi story. But
I'll let Arthur add some meat to these bones, but essentially that's where we kick off at the very beginning of book 2, is that Craig is in real trouble. He's in real financial trouble. He hasn't got any money, and he's going to owe tens of millions of dollars potentially, and he might even go to prison. So he needs money from outside. And at the same time, his old friend Stephen Matthews has been tasked by Calvin Ayre to find him some tech-based investments in the Asia Pacific region. So Stephen and Craig come together, and together they hatch this plan to sell Craig as Satoshi, which he's already started, as Arthur said earlier, started to dip his toe in that water. And they come up with this plan that's how they're going to do it. Because if Craig had approached Calvin on his own, he maybe wouldn't have got anywhere. But if you've got someone that you trust, if you've got a friend that comes to you, especially someone who you've tasked with finding you some investments, but someone that you've known for years and years comes to you and says, "Oh my God, I've got this great horse. This great horse is running. You've got to get in on it. I've put my money in. You've got to get on this horse. It's going to win." What are you going to do? You're going to go, "Okay, mate, I believe you. Let's bet on the horse." So Stephen Matthews is the broker here. So Stephen Matthews leverages his relationship with Calvin Ayre and his new position as investment advisor to present Craig as an investable asset. And Craig talks up the companies, they talks up the work they're doing. And as we have found, Craig is very convincing, like a lot of con men are. He's very convincing face to face. If you're not a technical person, Calvin Ayre's admitted he's not a technical person. He doesn't know, he knew Bitcoin for a good few years, but not on a technical basis. So when Craig Wright's blathering at you for like a day straight about Bitcoin, it kind of sounds feasible if he's using all these long words, and it sounds coherent. So Calvin Ayre, it buys in because he believes what Craig's telling him, and he buys in because Stephen Matthews is the one bringing him to the table. So that's the really crucial point. Without those two elements together, this doesn't happen. So that's why it needed both of them to do this.
So you think, so how did Stephen and Craig know each other, or did Craig go to Stephen? Do we know? Yeah, do we know when that connection started?
They knew each other from several years earlier from other projects that they had been doing together. Actually, Craig Wright was also not a completely unknown name to Calvin Ayre, because Calvin hired him. Well, not maybe Calvin directly, but one of his personnel hired Craig Wright in the Bodog era to do some jobs for Bodog. So it was already a bit of an insider, a bit of a clique together. They knew each other, and that's how the contacts were laid very sort of smoothly. I think they knew each other for a few years already.
And I'll tell you what, if you're a fan of changing narratives, chapter 1 of the second book just puts into very clear detail how much of a nonsense this story is. It's Stephen Matthews' recollections of this era, how he got back in touch with Craig across two or three interviews and a couple of court cases. He changed his mind on almost every single aspect of the timeline. When he met back up with Craig, what they said, what happened, all this sort of stuff. He upended it. He said he just changed his mind all the time, could not keep his story straight. Then CoinGeek came out with a piece saying how Bitcoin was saved. That changed it again. He then had to stick with that news story for the Granna v. Wright trial, because that was now in print, so he had to stick with that. And then at the Copa v. Wright trial, they found an email from 2014 that basically appended the entire 3 years worth of stories he'd been telling and backdated everything by an entire year, because he'd forgotten he'd gotten back in touch with Craig in early 2014. It's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. So you just know, I mean, he couldn't tell the truth if he tried at this point, because he just changes his mind on absolutely everything. There's a great moment where he says I think it's for the Granna v. Wright case, and he says, I knew that I met Craig in early 2015 because I went to Sydney to meet Craig with my wife, and it was the first time I've ever seen Sydney fireworks for New Year's Eve live. They're like, okay, that's quite a memorable event. You're going to remember the year that you went to see that for the first time. So roll around 2 years later for the Copa trial. He's sitting doing his witness statement. This email is bounced out that shows that he actually met Craig a year earlier than he said. So in his statement, he says, I knew I met him in 2014 because I went to Sydney with my wife. We met with Craig, and it was the first time I've ever seen Sydney fireworks for New Year's Eve live. Which year is this again? It's just these little moments that are just absolute, just show that it's a nonsense.
Yeah, and how he got the white paper, then it's a paper print, and then it's on a USB stick, and then he printed it himself. And man, I remember that Justice Meller, I think he is referencing several of those anecdotes. What changed all the time, but there are many of them. Crazy.
There's literally a podcast on the white paper, on the the drafts of the white paper that he had, the times that it was published, the number of people he says he shared it with, and how just the number of the story about his creation of the white paper is wild. There's an unlimited amount of.
What's great as well is that he spends so long crafting the narrative, because as you said earlier, he'll say something, and then when he'll be at another trial or another interview, and he'll add something else or change something else. So he's crafting this story as he goes, and we get to the Copa trial, and you're like, okay, we've got all these years worth of stories so far. This is what you're saying has happened so far. And he brings latex into it. And suddenly all those last 9 years are rendered completely irrelevant because he's written the whole thing in latex but never mentioned it before. He's got this way of just upending years worth of stories and not thinking anything about it and thinking, yeah, that they'll believe this, even though I've never, ever referenced it.
Man, he's the perfect example of a confidence con man. And I think that makes sense why, why he seems to have success in person, but doesn't in kind of the online world, is, with the exception of his little cult. But that, you don't, every time I experience some claim or whatever that he had, I didn't get it from him. I wasn't in some social situation where I had to worry about how overbearing he was or anything, or I had to make a signal in the group one way or the other. I just heard his claim, and then it's well, that seems completely bonkers. You didn't back this up at all, and it's interesting that, kind of the information age, the way we're exposed to things give us such different perspectives, because it's literally about the funnel, where did you get exposed to this? How did this get introduced to you to build your entire perspective around, which obviously has positives and negatives, but still just it probably lends itself to why they wanted to stay quiet for so long, because he does seem to have that like, is it charisma? Is it, I don't know what it's just the sheer dumb confidence in person that if you're quiet and you're just talking to people, that people can't resist, like people can't say no to you because you're just like, you're so like, I am this, and like it just like wear people down until they have to say yes.
There's a thing, I think I referenced it in book 2. It's called the confidence heuristic. And it first came about in 1970s psychological research. And apparently the confidence heuristic is where it is the level to which you believe someone speaking because of how they come across, not what they're saying, because of how they come across and the intensity that they're speaking with. So politicians, good politicians, cult leaders, con men, they find people whose confidence heuristic they can exploit. And so they are what they say, and what they say is ignored, but how they say it is what is embedded. So Craig Wright is very good at exploiting this confidence heuristic because he finds the people that will not analyze the words he's saying, but will listen to how he's saying it, listen to the passion he's got for this subject, listen to what sounds like it could be feasible. They put that all together, and that equals truth for them. Whereas others, they cannot exploit this confidence heuristic. So that was some research I did for the book. And I think Craig and a lot of other con men have got this ability to exploit the confidence heuristic, where they can just sound knowledgeable, sound important, sound authoritative, and they are believed.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially just with the way, I mean, he will literally, there are times where I've watched him on video and he will say something, and not even necessarily when he's caught in the corner, like almost out of pure habitual nature. He will say something and I'll listen to it and I'll just be like, he just pulled that out of his ass. Like he didn't think about this going into it. He didn't know he was going to be asked that question. He totally just yanked that out of his ass, and it has effects, like it just like this actually has like concrete consequences in his narrative. And he's totally just, again, just not like nothing, like just no, all I have to do is just all I have to do is just say it with conviction, and doesn't matter what it is. And
doing the best example of that was right before the Climber v. Wright case, where he was talking to his online followers about the IP, about the value of the intellectual property that was really also at the heart of that case. He said, because he was obviously boasting about how good and amazing his work is, he reckoned that the value of the IP, the W&K that he brought back over, was worth $250 billion. So he was trying to make himself the big I am. Oh yeah, the work I was doing is now worth $250 billion. So what Ayre Climbing's team did, they said, okay, well, if you think it's worth that, we're going to sue you for that. But Florida law allows us to either double or treble the amount of damages that a civil plaintiff can be awarded. So purely because of him boasting about what the value was worth, he was sued for $600 billion in IP just because of his boasting. So that is a prime example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I remember it was even slightly higher, because at some point it was called the $1 trillion case or something. Also,
probably once you added the Bitcoin in with the IP, it probably would have got around that.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So cases are still ongoing. I mean, not even just with this Wirecard thing that has come out, which may be dragging him back into court, but there's still stuff unfolding, right? What's happening with Craig at the moment, other than cucumber growing?
I think, well, the only two that I can think of, we still don't know what's happened with the Roger Ver libel case in Antigua, because Craig tried to sue Roger Ver in the UK, but that was dismissed on jurisdictional grounds. But he sued him in Antigua, and that went ahead. But crickets since then. We have to assume he's folded it, because there's been nothing since then, and we have to assume that. But also, Christian Ager Hansen sued N-Chain, and I think he sued Calvin Ayre, he sued Craig Wright, he sued Stephen Matthews as part of his going rogue, and he sued a bunch of these guys. I forget what, even 4 now. But again, he filed the lawsuit months and months ago, and there's been nothing since then. But apart from that, legally, Craig is done, dead, gone.
So, okay.
Yeah, and there's still the BSV class action something, BSV claims, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's not worth anything because BSV is not worth anything, but
that's not, Craig isn't involved in that directly.
Yeah. So this is the thing that, trying to have as, I don't have any respect for it, so that's probably nonsense, but trying to give as much credit as possible, especially considering he didn't win a lot of these lawsuits, as much credit as possible to the legal system. How is he not in jail? Like, how do you falsely sue a dozen people? How do you submit over 500 like provably forged documents into court cases? How do you do everything that has happened? Try to commit tax fraud for 4 years. And how is he not in jail?
I'll answer from the UK perspective, and Arthur can maybe speak to the issues in Australia. So I completely agree. It is unfathomable that someone can forge things to that extent and can get away with it. So what happened after the Copa case, it took a few months for the written ruling to come out. And in that written ruling, I even think it wasn't even in that written ruling. It was a form of order case, maybe afterwards, but at the very, very earliest, we're talking months after the verbal ruling, Justice Miller came out and said, I'm going to refer Craig Wright to the Crown Prosecution Service for potential perjury charges, and Stephen Matthews. So what happens then is that the case is forwarded to the CPS. They look at the case and see, right, is there enough evidence to secure a conviction? Is it in the public interest to spend public money prosecuting this person? And how important is this case in the grand scheme of things, in the public interest? So Craig's file is in a massive stack with rapists, murderers, child molesters, all these people in the UK that have committed a crime that the Crown Prosecution Service have to assess their case and see whether they are worth spending public money to prosecute them. That's where his case was stuck. And I put out a statistic a few months ago, I forget what it was, but there's like tens of thousands of cases that came up in the 3 months or 4 months after that moment. So he is, I forget what it was, but it was so high. And so he is basically, as far as I'm concerned, he is dropping down the list on a quarterly basis. And it's been, a year and a half now, and there's been not a peep. So they're either still looking at the case, or they have decided that for whatever reason they're not going to pursue it. It would be fantastic if they made an example of him, but I'm not sure that they will. The other side of it is that he should be in jail for contempt of court. I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but this time last year, roughly, he was supposed to be pulled back into court because he violated the injunction that COPA won, where he basically was not allowed to sue anybody based. This is a misconception that needs clearing up. After the COPA lawsuit, after the COPA trial finished, there was a bunch of COPA wanted some remedial action, and his lawyers argued against it. COPA wanted to stop Craig Wright from being allowed to say he's Satoshi Nakamoto. They said, you're not allowed to call yourself Satoshi. The argument was that breaches his human rights because he's allowed, just like any of us are, to stand on a street corner and shout, I am Satoshi, without fear of being arrested. Perfectly valid. So what was decided was that Craig was not allowed to sue anybody based on his Satoshi identity, perceived Satoshi identity. But he's going around telling people he's not allowed to call himself Satoshi because he wants to be a martyr. So that's an important point to note. So he filed a lawsuit straight after losing to COPA in which he effectively said, I created Bitcoin. So Copa said, no, you've breached the injunction. You've said you're Satoshi. You said you created Bitcoin. You need to go to prison now because it's contempt of court. Long story short, he was found guilty of contempt of court, but by that point, he already skipped to Asia to avoid being potentially caught up in this. And he was called back to the UK to face trial for this case. He refused to come back, and it wasn't deemed necessary to try and fight for extradition for this case. So he got a suspended sentence for that. So that's where we are with the UK cases. But Arthur, I'll let you handle the Australian side of things.
Now, one thing that I want to mention when it comes to the English case, you just mentioned you need an example. But is Craig Wright an example that needs to be taken as an example for likewise people? Not many people are that crazy, not in this same way. I mean, for how many people will he be an example? He is a clown. He has been doing fraud, but if you want to use an example that not many other people will do it, well, not many people are doing it anyway. So indeed, I can imagine that CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, is not putting him high on the list, and it disappoints me because I really would like to see him in jail. I mean, I'm honest about that. On the other hand, being realistically, I don't think there's a high chance anymore, because to whom will he be an example? Who is done justice when he is in jail? You have to keep him on a leash, that he is not what Mark just explained, that he should and not be able to do any lawsuits anymore, so he cannot harm people anymore. But if you want to have an example against other people who might want to try to do the same, then I think child molesters and rapists, and I mean, that is happening way more and causing way more personal damage in society. So they should be, and I'm very realistic about that now, they should be higher on the list. Let's be fair, you know? Now, yeah, and sort of the same thing is probably playing out in Australia too. What we do know, however, is that Australia is sort of strict with tax fraud. They try to put everybody already for several tens of thousands of dollars for a few years in jail, to take an example, because tax fraud is actually happening and happening. I'm not saying a lot, but it's happening in Australia. So they do take these people from the street, even from foreign countries, from America, for example. I remember a case where a guy, I think he was a trader, exchange trader or something, and he fled to America, but he was also brought back to Australia to put in jail. So do I expect Craig Wright to see the consequences of his Australian tax fraud? I hope so. But they take a long time, 10, 11, 12 years easily, after ramping it up to a criminal case. And when was it ramped up to a criminal case? That was in 2015. When his house and his offices were raided. That was the kickoff of the criminal case against. Now we know that in 2018 the criminal case was still running, so I expect it to be still running. But the counter for 10, 12 years started only in 2015, and then we arrive in 2025, 26, 27. Will it happen? Yeah, we don't know. I sort of hope so, because of course this guy is such a criminal. He deserves to be in jail and not being able to harm on the internet, because now he is, well, when he is leeching on Calvin Ayre, I don't care, but he still has this cult that is losing money in the thousands and tens of thousands of money that they put in his products, in BSV, in the Belief of Terror note being the thing.
Is that all still going on? Is there still?
Yeah. Enchain has how do you could it has been brought back to the bones. It's not much anymore. They had I think between 200 and 300 developers, but they sold everything or fired several people. I think it's only a few dozen people only working there, but it still has something going. The token has dropped from on the highest point on the market cap list was number 5. Number 4 even I heard something say, but what I saw was number 5 several years ago in the heydays. But currently it's hovering between 150 and 200 somewhere. It's
Whoa,
nothing.
it's not even being tracked on CoinMarketCap anymore.
Yeah, I think so. But it should be around between 150 and 200.
Okay, it's just not showing up in the thing. So it's $20.
Yeah, a few months ago, OKX has always been a big supporter of BSV, but even they delisted BSV. So, so you can already predict that Terra Node, which is the latest product that they're going to release, or it's actually already released, that should bring scaling to BSV. Now we don't see any enterprise running in droves.
I've always said that this whole BSV scaling Terranode thing reminds me of that North Korean superhighway where it's 26 lanes of motorway and 5 cars on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So there's still so much. I still can't even believe we literally even didn't even touch on the white paper. And I didn't even register until you brought that up. And I was like, oh my God, that's like a whole thing. So obviously we can't cover the whole book, let alone all 3 books. But to be respectful of both of your times, what would you say to anyone who's still bought into this at this point, to somebody because without a doubt, we're going to hit some major haters listening to this. In fact, they seem to do it like a job sometimes. And like, if they made it this far, what do you say to, whether or not you're trying to get through to them or not, I don't care. What do you want to say to those people who may still be here?
For me, like you just said, the one thing I wouldn't say is anything about looking at facts and look at this and research, because they're past it. Anyone that is still believing him now is past redemption, so that it's pointless to have that conversation. So all I would say is don't put any more money into this. If you've lost money, if you've put money in, just do yourself a favor. Stop putting money into it. I'm not saying go and buy Bitcoin. I'm not saying go and buy anything else. Just stop putting any more money into this, because you're just going to keep losing it. You're past saving now, so just save what little money you've got left, please.
Arthur?
Yeah, so same for me. Actually, I hardly interact with BSV fans anymore these days. After the Copa case, I completely lost interest in at least communicating with the BSV fan club. And I'm still blocking them, not on a daily basis anymore, because that fan club is not so big anymore. But every now and then you run into new people, and then there was this Kate Mosso girl, I think, recently, who popped up, and I think I only responded to her twice, and she already blocked me because she already immediately noticed that I was not a fan of Craig Wright. Yeah, so I'm following it sort of the sidelines, but on the sidelines of the sidelines. And yeah, I only have one message. If you can give me evidence that is dated, and it's genuine evidence, and it's dated before July 2011, that Craig Wright is indeed Satoshi, bring it to me. But I know already it's never coming. Yeah.
If I was going to try and challenge them, I would say take one page of the book and try and debunk anything that I've said, anything that we've said in there, any point we've made, anything negative against Craig, you can find on one page. Debunk that, please. But they just can't, because the thing is as well, I won't keep going on about it, but Craig often debunks himself. He will usually tell a story, as you said, he'll tell a story and then he'll undermine that story a few weeks or months or years later. So he's doing my job for me. I don't need to go and research why that's a lie, because he'll lie about it again in a few months' time anyway. So, it's like...
You're just going to wait for him to do it.
So find something in there. Take one page of the book at random and tell me that I'm wrong.
I like it. All right. So now we have since we're finally published and book and audio book and everything. So for anybody who's listening and wants a free version of the audiobook, Mark, how do we do that?
So this is coming out on Friday the 28th, I believe it's going to be. I think I've got the date right there. Yeah, so that's the date today. So what we're going to do, we're going to give away 10 free copies to Audible listeners. So between Friday 28th and Tuesday 2nd of November, email us. There's a very specific email address we've got, and we will, after Tuesday, we'll pick 10 people that have emailed through to receive a code where you can redeem to get a free copy of FakeToshi Volume 1 on Audible. So just email. You can put a message, you can swear at us, you can give us praise, whatever you want to do. Just make sure you email us, FakeToshi@bitcoinaudible.com. So FakeToshi@bitcoinaudible.com. And then we will pick the 10 winners on Tuesday, 2nd of December, and email you back with your code. Good luck.
Hell yeah. Guys, thank you. Sorry for the officially, publicly, for the a little bit of a mishap in trying to get this scheduled and my dropping the ball there. I want to respect your time, and I thank you so much for coming back and making this work and joining me, and for the just insane amount of work in detailing and telling this story, because it really is just fascinating. I love doing the audiobook. I'm stoked to get volume 2 and 3, and just thank you. It's been a hell of a thing.
It's been great. Thank you. And thank you for doing volume
Maybe
1.
we will see you with book number 2, but will be next year in March.
Hell yeah. Just, keep me updated. Shoot me an email. Y'all can get in touch with me if you ever need anything. And thank you for coming on. Maybe we'll have to do another one of these.
Oh yeah, next year definitely. We've got 2 more.
Thank you, bye. See you. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Later, guys.
See ya.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. There's literally so much to unpack, and I cannot recommend this book and the series enough. You'll probably hear about it again when volume 2 comes out, particularly the audiobook, because I consume everything through audiobook if I'm not explicitly reading it, usually for an audiobook or the show or something these days. It's the only avenue that I have that I really have access to all the time. I will be listening to Mark Hunter read part 2 and part 3 to me, and it will come back up undoubtedly. And he actually sent me a few other links as well as the details to get a free copy of the audiobook. Again, we have 10 different codes, and if you send an email to FakeToshi@bitcoinaudible.com, you should be able to find the links that he sent as well as the details down in the show notes. But just shoot an email, whatever it is, to that email address, and we'll put you in the running, and Mark will pick them out on Tuesday. So good luck with that. I hope you get a free copy, but if not, I've got the link so that you can go snag your own version off of Audible anytime that you like. And yeah, don't forget to follow Arthur Van Pelt for his writing, Mark Hunter, the podcast, the content, the work, just the incredible amount of work that they do. And don't forget to follow the show, shout it out, tell everybody you know about it. Everybody who doesn't know about the FakeToshi story, man, it's wild. Even outside of whether or not you know anything about Bitcoin, it's a fascinating story. And a shout out to Ledin for Bitcoin-backed loans and for supporting the show, to Synonym and the PubKey stack that they have created to re-decentralize the web. Please, if you are a builder, check it out. You might find something fascinating. And then Get Chroma. They actually have, I just noticed somebody sent me a message. They actually have a 21% off sale. So I've got a 10% discount for you, but right now, because of Black Friday stuff, they have a 21% off sale. So check that out, especially if you're thinking of getting nightshades. A really good product that I swear by. My friend was thinking of getting the Radiance, which is a red light. Definitely check those out. And then lastly, the HRF and their financial freedom report and the Oslo Freedom Forum and the insane work that they do, and for supporting my work. Thank you all to the Audionauts as well, who zap, who stream sats, who listen to this show, who share it out, and who enjoy me getting together with people and reading about and talking about and ranting about Bitcoin. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, that's my 2 sats.